we're getting closer and closer to BTI, and it's coming up very quickly. I'm getting more and more excited about it. I can't wait to be able to go and be in the presence of the Lord, because I know He's going to be there. But I began to think on the theme, and it's really just, I like the theme, training for the harvest. And that's kind of what I want to speak on a little bit tonight. As I began to look up the theme, I looked up the word train. Train is, the definition for the training is intended for use during an introductory, learning, or transitional period. Now, first thought that came to my mind, none of us are in need of training. Most all of us have been in the church all our lives. And, we're not in an introductory period anymore. I know Brother Tim's been in it all his life, and Sister Wyland, and Brother Barry, and Brother Cox back here. But honestly, aren't we all in need of more training from God?
Yes, we are. That's right.
But there's a song out there, and it says, "How refreshing to know you don't need me, but how amazing to find that you want me." God doesn't need us for anything, but He wants to use us. But before He can use us, He's going to train us.
Yes, He will. Right.
And in Matthew, the 9th chapter, and 37th verse, speaks a little bit about harvesting. To harvest is to gather crops together. In Matthew 9 and 37, it says, "The harvest is truly plenteous, but the laborers are few." Truly, in the world today, the harvest is plenteous. There are a lot of sinners out there that we need to go out and get, but the laborers are few. God's willing to use us. God's willing to put us to work, but are we willing to be laborers for Him? Somebody's not. And I'll admit, I've not been that laborer. I've not been willing to do everything I can, but I want to get to that place. But just as we can't complete a job in the world without first being trained, God's going to train us before we go out and work for Him. In Genesis 14 and 14, when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. Now, in my mind, I think Abram was a pretty smart guy here. He figured out, well, his brother was taken captive. They could be coming after me next. So he took just some regular servants and went out and gave them a bunch of guns and swords and everything else. That's what the scripture says, ain't it? That's right. That's not exactly it. It said he gave it to his trained servants. He didn't give it to just anybody. And God's not going to give everything to anybody to go out and waste it. But He's going to train us before He does it. And remember, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. I want to say one more thing before I give it back over to Brother Cox. But who knows anything about farming or planting crops or anything? Tim and Shannon do, and Josh, Sister Naomi know a little bit. But as I begin to think about it a little bit, what's the first thing you got to do before you can even plant a seed? Plow the ground. As I begin to think about that, familiar scripture popped into my mind, and it was 1 Corinthians 3 and 6. I use it a lot, and I've heard it all my life, but it says, "I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase." It doesn't really say anything about plowing here, but as I begin to think about that, I begin to think about Brother Donnie, and I don't think he'll mind me using him as an example. He said he's okay with it, so I'm going to do it. But how long, Brother Barry, was it that we prayed and tilled up that ground before he would get to church? That's right. We prayed and we kept tilling until he got to church. But when he got to church, that ground was tilled up enough Brother Cox could plant that seed. And it just so happened that night that Donnie got saved, Brother Campbell was able to water it.
That's right.
But still yet, God gave us the increase.